Inspired on the work Where There Is No Doctor, mainly authored by David Werner. Episode 1, The First Experience Point. The sky wasn't blue. That was the first thing Daniel noticed when he opened his eyes. It was too clear, too pure, as if someone had washed the firmament with mountain water. The air that filled his lungs was also drastically different. It didn't smell like Bogota smog or gasoline or fried street food. It smelled like damp earth, pine leaves, and with smoke. Daniel sat up slowly, shaking his head. "Okay," he muttered, feeling the grass under his hands. This is definitely not Bogota. Around him stood a rustic village. Raw wooden houses, woven straw roofs, chickens pecking freely at the dirt, and barefoot children running between the huts. In the distance, intensely green mountains rose like unbreakable walls. And in front of him, 3 people were watching him with a palpable mix of fear and desperate hope. A young woman with red eyes was holding a small child in her arms. The little one's skin was pale and covered in a cold sweat. An older man, his face weathered by the sun, took a step forward. "Stranger," he said with a cautious voice. Are you a doctor?" Daniel felt a cold knot in his stomach. He wasn't a doctor. He had read countless medical books, articles, survival manuals, and specialized forums out of pure obsession and curiosity, but he lacked formal education. He opened his mouth to deny it and avoid a tragedy. But in that exact second, the world in front of him blinked. A translucent, luminous panel materialized in his field of vision, emitting a soft hum. Healing system initiated. Initial class detected. Healer apprentice. Base knowledge source. Community medicine compendium. Level 1. New skill unlocked. Basic clinical observation. Passive allows evaluation of superficial vital signs at a glance. Main objective. Direct hit learn to distinguish between useful wisdom and lethal ignorance. Progress to level 2. 0/10 EXP. Daniel blinked hard, but the floating window didn't disappear. Instead, the text reconfigured with a golden flash. First medical axiom unlocked. Traditional medicine is not inherently useless, but it is not inherently safe either. Context is the key to survival. Daniel let the air out slowly. "Okay, I'm in a medical Isekai." The woman with the child broke his concentration, taking a step closer. "Please," she begged with trembling voice, holding the little one tightly. "He has had a high fever since last night. It won't break." Daniel focused his eyes on the child. His initial instinct, forged in the modern world, was to immediately think of drugs. Paracetamol, ibuprofen, or even some broad-spectrum antibiotic if there was an infection. However, before he could speak, a red warning flashed in his peripheral vision. Warning system tip. Malpractice alert. Before intervening empirically, a true healer must perform a cultural anamnesis. Understand 3 things. 1. What is the local belief about the origin of this disease? 2. What home interventions have already been administered? 3. Which of those interventions are placebos, which help, and which could be fatal if they interact with a new treatment? Daniel stopped. He remembered an article on medical anthropology that he had devoured years ago. In isolated communities, imposing modern medicine without understanding cultural medicine generates rejection and cross-negligence. It wasn't about mocking their methods, but about separating empirical science from risk. He looked directly into the older man's eyes, adopting a calm posture. "Before examining him, I need to know everything. What have you given him to treat it so far?" The old man exhaled, relieved not to be judged immediately. "We made him drink bitter herbal tea from a forest, and we put cold mud poultices on his forehead." Daniel processed the information quickly. Herbal tea, that's a game of Russian roulette. Depending on the species, it could be a natural antipyretic or contain hepatotoxic alkaloids. Cold mud, it is not a septic, but physically it acts as a compress to lower the superficial temperature through thermal transfer. It doesn't cure the etiology of the fever, but it mitigates the local symptom. A crystalline sound echoed in his mind. Intervention analysis completed. Herb treatment 1, wild herbal tea. Warning status, unknown risk. Requires urgent botanical identification to rule out toxicity in the pediatric patient. Droplet treatment 2, cold mud on the frontal area. Green circle status. Safe symptomatic measure. Effective for temporary superficial thermoregulation. Trophy. Procedural achievement. By performing a prior inquiry instead of administering treatments blindly, you have avoided possible severe adverse reactions. +1 EXP. Daniel raised an eyebrow, watching the experience bar fill a fraction. Did I just earn literal clinical experience? Current level, 1. Experience, 1/10. He turned his attention back to the patient. Thanks to his new passive skill, he noticed finer details. Mild diaphoretic sweating, tachypneic breathing, slightly accelerated, but without cyanosis or signs of imminent shock. There was still a margin of time. Fundamental healer lesson. Every culture possesses a triad of remedies. Green circle those that save lives. Yellow circle those that act as psychological comfort, harmless placebos. Red circle those that accelerate death. Your first mission is not to impose your science. It is to classify their world. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the initial fear being replaced by a sharp analytical clarity. "All right," he said, with a much firmer and more authoritative voice. "I need you to immediately show me the exact leaves you used to make that tea. Don't hide anything from me." The villagers exchanged looks of astonishment. No one had asked them that before. Previous healers usually just discarded their methods with disgust. For the first time in their eyes, there was not only fear but genuine respect. The system reacted to that change in attitude. Scroll new quest unlocked. The first botanical triage. Objective. Identify the herbs administered to the patient. Separate the cure from the poison. Success reward. +5 EXP and unlocking the skill traditional materia medica evaluation. Failure penalty. Worsening of the patient's condition. Daniel gave a half smile, rolling up his sleeves. "Well," he muttered to himself, "I guess we start with the basics." Because before becoming the savior of this world, he first had to learn what the hell was making it sick. Episode 2. The Inventory of Beliefs. The woman led Daniel to a rough wooden table. On it lay a small, organized chaos. Deep green leaves, knotty roots, a clay bowl with cloudy water, and a coarse cloth bag that gave off a strong smell. Too penetrating. The feverish child was now sleeping on a blanket near the fire, breathing with difficulty. Daniel leaned over the table, resting his hands on the edge. "Okay, let's see what we have here." As soon as his fingers touched the first plant, the familiar hum resonated in his head, and the translucent window unfolded before him. Active skill, basic clinical observation. Books, new subsystem unlocked, materia medica catalog. Daniel held a long leaf with jagged edges up to his eyes. "What do you call this one?" he asked. "Bitter leaf," the woman replied in a whisper. "We boil it. It is used for the fever." Daniel brought the leaf to his nose and then rubbed a small piece against his finger. Bitter, yes, extremely astringent. The system processed the information in real time. Botanical analysis completed. Identified remedy, local bitter leaf infusion. Mechanism of action. Provides oral hydration plus possible mild febrifuge antipyretic. Effect due to its alkaloids. Green circle classification. Potentially useful. Safe for consumption. Trophy +2 EXP for correctly identifying a supportive remedy. Daniel raised an eyebrow, surprised by the efficiency of the interface. "Not bad." The older man, noticing the approval on the stranger's face, smiled with evident pride. "Our grandfathers knew things. Stranger, they knew the land." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, some of them did." And there it was. The system seemed to react to his understanding, displaying golden text. First principle of community medicine, before dismissing a traditional remedy out of modern arrogance, evaluate its pragmatic utility. 1. Does it provide vital hydration? 2. Does it facilitate thermoregulation, cool the body? 3. Does it possess analgesic or anti-inflammatory properties? 4. Is there a risk of hepatic or renal toxicity? Ancestral knowledge often works through pure biomechanics, even if the community is unaware of the chemistry behind it. Encouraged, Daniel took the next item from the table, a thick, dark root. "And that is for stomach pain," the woman added quickly. Daniel examined it closely. It had no particular smell or recognizable texture. Botanical analysis completed. Identified remedy, unknown endemic root. Composition data, insufficient. Yellow circle, provisional classification, uncertain effect. Unquantifiable risk. Trophy plus 1 EXP. For applying principle of primum non nocere, first do no harm. Daniel placed the root back on the table carefully. This, better not use it for now. The older man frowned, his pride slightly wounded. Does it not work? Daniel shrugged, keeping a respectful tone. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But when someone's body is already fighting a disease, we cannot risk giving them something their liver or kidneys cannot process. We will use only what we know for certain will help. The system validated his logic with a soft chime. Light bulb, new lesson registered. Most neutral traditional remedies do not kill the patient, but their true danger lies in the opportunity cost. They are lethal when they replace the clinical treatment that would save a life. Finally, Daniel turned his attention to the small cloth bag. As he opened the drawstring, a grayish powder and a sharp, irritating smell immediately escaped, making him cough. The system didn't blink this time. It exploded in deep red. Red circle, critical toxicology alert. Identified remedy, mixture of alkaline ash and crushed tobacco leaves. Reported local use, expelling evil spirits of disease. Physiological risk, warning high probability of bronchospasm and severe irritation of the respiratory tract. Warning critical risk of dermal or inhalatory nicotine poisoning in pediatric patients. Daniel snapped the bag shut, tying the cord tightly. Not this. Definitely not. The woman stepped back, confused and fearful. But the village shaman says the smoke and powder scare the fever away. It helps clean the lungs. Daniel breathed slowly. He realized this was his first real challenge. It wasn't just about prescribing pills or diagnosing symptoms. It was about dismantling dangerous beliefs without destroying people's trust. Brain, second principle of the healer. When a remedy is a poison, strict prohibition is useless. If you only say this is wrong, they will use it in secret as soon as you turn your back. Educate. Explain the mechanism of injury. Daniel looked at the sleeping child, whose chest was rising and falling with effort, and then held the bag of powder up to the woman. Listen to me, he said in a soft but firm voice. Your son's body is a battlefield right now. He is using all his energy to fight the heat. If this powder enters his lungs, it won't scare the disease. It will suffocate the child. It will force his body to fight the powder in addition to the fever. Do you understand? The woman turned pale, looking from the bag to her son. Can it make him worse? Yes, it could cost him his life. A heavy silence fell over the hut. The older man crossed his arms, thoughtful, absorbing the stranger's logic. Finally, he nodded solemnly. Then that bag goes into the fire. We will not use it. A triumphant sound, like the popping of pure energy, flooded Daniel's mind. White heavy check mark. Quest completed. The first botanical triage. Objective. Identify safe remedies and discard toxins. Reward. Plus 5 EXP. Glowing star level up. Current level 2. Progress 0/25 EXP. Stethoscope, new skill unlocked. Basic pathology evaluation allows crossing visible symptoms to suggest initial diagnoses. Daniel smiled, feeling a small rush of adrenaline. Okay, that was fast. But his relief was short-lived. The warm golden light of the level up faded, replaced by the cold, clinical tone of a diagnostic alert directly over the child's body. Microscope, pediatric patient analysis, detected signs and symptoms. Small orange diamond persistent fever. EST temperature greater than 38.5 degrees Celsius. Small orange diamond tachypnea, accelerated breathing. Small orange diamond asthenia, generalized weakness. Warning pre-diagnosis. Possible acute infectious state. Scroll, new main quest unlocked. Objective. Determine the etiology origin of the fever. Is it a self-limiting infection or a lethal threat? Hourglass not untime limit to avoid neurological damage or sepsis. Before dawn. Reward. Plus 10 EXP. Daniel swallowed hard and looked at the child again, listening to his labored breathing in the silence of the hut. The tutorial phase was over. Now, there was a real patient in critical danger, and the true test of the system was about to begin. Episode 3, Signs That Must Not Be Ignored. The fire crackled softly in the center of the hut, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Outside, the village was beginning to sink into the night silence. Only the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the cold wind brushing the treetops could be heard. Daniel, sitting cross-legged next to the sick child, felt as if time had stopped. The fever was still there, persistent like a glowing ember. It didn't feel extreme to the touch, but the system's preliminary diagnosis kept flashing in his mind with an unsettling word: possible infection. Daniel gently placed the back of his hand on the little one's sweaty forehead. Hot, too hot, but he knew, from everything he'd read, that temperature alone did not dictate the severity of a pediatric emergency. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the system's crystalline hum manifested again. Eye active skill, basic disease evaluation, police Scarlight, submodule unlocked, clinical danger signs. The translucent panel expanded, showing a critical list in red and white letters. Warning: universal danger signs in pediatric patients. If the patient presents one or more of these signs, the risk of mortality is imminent. 1. Severe respiratory distress, chest indrawing. 2. Inability to drink, swallow, or breastfeed. 3. Ongoing or recent seizures. 4. Extreme lethargy, abnormal weakness, or inability to wake up. 5. Refractory fever, very high, and does not yield any means. 6. Continuous vomiting, cannot retain fluids. Light bulb system note: a true healer does not need to know the exact name of the pathogen to recognize when a patient is on the brink of death. Visual triage is your first line of defense. Daniel tilted his head, absorbing the information. It made perfect sense. In the emergency room, the first goal is never the perfect differential diagnosis. It is to stabilize and rule out an immediate vital risk. He leaned further over the child, sharpening his senses. He's breathing fast, he murmured, observing the rise and fall of the small chest. Microscope, evaluation in progress. Respiratory rate, elevated moderate tachypnea, but without severe intercostal indrawing. There is no critical effort. Trophy plus 1 EXP for focus observation. Daniel took the bowl of clean water the woman had brought earlier. He brought it to the child's parched lips with extreme care. Little one, he whispered in a soft voice, try to drink a little, just a sip. The child frowned, opened his eyes heavily, and after a second of hesitation, took a slow sip. He swallowed without choking. Daniel released a breath he didn't know he was holding. It was an excellent sign. Bar chart, clinical analysis update. White heavy checkmark ability to drink. Present and functional. White heavy checkmark level of consciousness. Preserved, responds to stimuli. Warning: immediate risk of collapse. Moderate/low. The older man, who had been watching in a tense silence from the doorway, finally spoke. Is he going to die? He asked, his voice raspy with fear. Daniel looked directly at him and shook his head, conveying confidence. I don't think so. Not tonight. But he knew that complacency was a doctor's greatest enemy, so he didn't sugarcoat the truth. He has a strong fever. His body is likely fighting an incipient infection. The mother tensed, clutching the edge of her skirt. Is it dangerous? Before Daniel could articulate an answer, the system panel updated in front of him. Brain, third principle of the healer. When etiology cause is a mystery, trust basic clinical practice. Observe. Small orange diamond, respiratory mechanics. Small orange diamond, neurological alertness. Small orange diamond, fluid retention. Small orange diamond, muscle tone. These 4 pillars will tell you more about the chances of survival than the Latin name of the disease. Daniel suddenly thought of the hospitals in his world. Vital signs monitors emitting rhythmic beeps. Arterial blood gas, ABG, tests, CT scans, antibiograms. Here, in the middle of nowhere, he lacked all of that. In this thatched roof hut, the line between life and death depended solely and exclusively on his eyes, his ears, and his common sense. He mentally reviewed the child again. He was breathing fast, yes, but he wasn't struggling for oxygen. There was no sign of seizures. He was lethargic, but not unconscious. That meant something crucial. The system was quick to validate it. Clipboard, preliminary evaluation completed. Patient status, stable under observation. Recommended clinical actions. Maintain constant oral hydration. Reduce core temperature through physical means. Continuous monitoring of progress. Trophy +2 EXP for ruling out imminent danger signs. Daniel leaned back a bit, relaxing his shoulders. For now, he is not in grave danger, he declared, addressing the mother. The woman let out a sigh, so deep it seemed to have been trapped in her lungs for hours. Tears welled up in her eyes. Thank the heavens, thank you. But the system, implacable as always, had not finished instructing him yet. Lightbulb new lesson registered. The time factor. In isolated communities, mortality is not always the fault of the pathogen's aggressiveness, but the delay in care. Families wait too long before seeking help. The long-term mission of a healer is not just a cure, but to educate the village so they recognize danger signs in time. Daniel looked at the sleeping child, bathed in the dim light of the fire. And for the first time since he opened his eyes in this strange world, the impact of his reality hit him with the force of an anvil. This wasn't a simple simulator. It wasn't a virtual reality game where you could restart the game if you failed. It wasn't about farming experience for fun. Here, every deduction, every omission, every damn decision could literally mean someone's life or death. A soft beat pulled him out of his thoughts. Direct hit new quest unlocked. Thermoregulation. Objective. Reduce the patient's fever using only safe and available methods in the environment. Avoid thermal shock. Success reward, +8 EXP. Daniel scanned the room. He saw the rustic wooden table with the remains of herbs. He saw the fire crackling. He saw the bowl of water and the coarse cloth rags. Well, he whispered to himself, rolling up his sleeves. It's time to learn how to lower a fever without a single pill of acetaminophen. Episode 4. Fever is not the enemy. The child's chest rose and fell with an irregular but persistent rhythm. Daniel brought his hand once more to the little one's damp forehead. It was still hot. It wasn't a scorching temperature that threatened to fry his neurons, but it was clearly above normal. The system responded to his touch by projecting a new luminous window that softly lit up his pupils. Direct hit active mission. Thermoregulation. Objective. Reduce the patient's fever safely. Potential reward, +8 EXP. Just below, a golden scroll unfurled with a soft murmur. Scroll medical lesson unlocked. The defense mechanism. Fever is not a disease. It is the battlefield. It is an immunological response designed to raise the internal temperature and create a hostile environment that hinders the reproduction of microbes and pathogens. Daniel frowned, nodding to himself. That was a fundamental truth that many people forgot, even in the modern hospitals of his world. Fever was uncomfortable, yes, exhausting and, at times, dangerous if it got out of control, but it was also the body's own heavy artillery. The system text blinked and changed. Brain, the healer's goal. Your goal should not always be to eradicate the fever completely. Your duty is to control it, so that collateral damage does not destroy the patient before the body wins the war. Daniel withdrew his hand and looked at the child's mother, who was waiting for instructions with wide eyes. We need to help his body cool down a bit in a controlled way, he said calmly. She nodded quickly, willing to do whatever it took. Should I put more cold mud from the shore on him? Before Daniel could answer, the system emitted a sharp warning hum. Warning, traditional method evaluation. Proposed treatment, mud poultices. Yellow Circle Pro, can reduce superficial temperature through thermal transfer. Red Circle Con, critical risk, high risk of introducing telluric bacteria from the soil into dilated pores, microscopic wounds, or mucous membranes. Clinical recommendation, replace with clean fluids. Daniel raised a hand, stopping her gently. We won't use mud. Mud is full of dirt and bacteria. If he has a scratch on his skin, we could cause a new infection. He pointed to a clay container in the corner of the hut. We will use clean water and cloth rags. The older man frowned, skeptical. Just water? Will that lower the fever the same way? Daniel gave him a small, reassuring smile. Yes, The water will absorb the heat from his skin as it evaporates. It is exactly the same effect, but without the risk of getting him dirty. The system endorses decision instantly. Scroll standard protocol. Physical fever management, safe and non-invasive methods. Continuous oral hydration. Replace fluids lost through sweating. Wet compresses with lukewarm/cool water in areas of high blood supply, forehead, armpits, groin. Light clothing to facilitate thermal dissipation. Absolute rest. Following his instructions, the woman was already soaking a coarse cotton rag in the cool water. Daniel took it and placed it with extreme gentleness over the child's forehead and temples. White heavy check mark. Clinical action detected. Safe cooling protocol successfully initiated. Trophy +2 EXP. The child stirred slightly at the cold contact. He didn't quite wake up, but the frown caused by the discomfort seemed to relax by a millimeter, and his breathing lost some of that raspy urgency. Daniel let out a small sigh, feeling that they were finally gaining ground. But then, the interface flashed blood red again. Warning, warning. Lethal MYDHS, many well-intentioned remedies worsen the clinical picture. 3 common errors in fever management. Overclothing the patient to sweat out the sickness. Restricting fluids or food due to dietary beliefs. Rubbing the skin with alcohol or irritating substances. Daniel looked up by pure instinct. His eyes widened. The woman had gone to a wooden chest and was pulling out 2 thick sheep's wool blankets. "I'll put these over him," she explained, stepping closer, "so he can sweat out the fever and expel the evil." "No." Daniel shook his head, raising his voice a bit more than intended before softening his tone. "No, please. Leave them there." The woman stopped in her tracks, clutching the blankets. "No, but the sweat. If we cover him too much right now, his body will act like an oven with a closed door," Daniel explained, gesturing with his hands. "The body needs to release that excess heat through the skin and into the air. If you cover with those blankets, the heat will get trapped and his internal temperature will rise to a dangerous level." Light bulb medical explanation validated. Mechanism of convection and radiation. Thermally insulating a febrile patient blocks hemolysis heat loss. It can induce severe hypothermia and seizures. The woman looked at the thick wool blankets, then at Daniel, and slowly put them back in the chest. "So, we leave him with only these thin clothes?" Daniel nodded firmly. "That is perfect. Let him breathe." A melodic chime rang in his head. Trophy successful prevention of iatrogenesis medical harm. +2 EXP. Daniel focused back on the patient. Something was changing. It wasn't an instant movie miracle, but simple physics was doing its job. The child's breathing seemed notably calmer. Bar chart, patient update. Core temperature, descending to safe levels, controlled thermal margin. General condition, stable. Daniel let himself fall back, resting his back against the rough wooden wall of the hut. For the first time since he woke up surrounded by strangers in a world he didn't understand, he felt something very much like confidence. Maybe this world didn't need dazzling healing magic. Maybe all that was needed in this forgotten corner was simple knowledge, empathy, and common sense applied with rigor. The system interrupted his moment of philosophical peace. Brain, 4th lesson of the healer. The vast majority of acute illnesses are self-limiting. The body heals itself. The healer's true job is threefold. Small orange diamond prevent external interventions from worsening the situation. Small orange diamond provides supportive care, so the body can endure the process. Small orange diamond recognize the exact second when the situation exceeds natural defenses. Daniel looked at the child, who was now sleeping much more peacefully. Direct hit mission update. Objective: keep the patient stable during the night watch. Challenge bonus: +6 extra EXP if no serious complications develop. Daniel looked through the doorway at the dark sky, dotted with unfamiliar stars. It's going to be a long night, he muttered to himself, settling on the floor. But at that exact moment, the silence of the hut was broken. The child coughed. It was a dry cough, short, a harsh sound that tore through the room's tranquility. It seemed harmless, but it was enough to make the room's temperature feel like it dropped 10 degrees. The system screen exploded in front of Daniel's eyes. Police Scarlight, new clinical symptom detected, Sign: dry cough, tussogenic reflex. Status: additional differential analysis required immediately. Daniel leaned forward, his muscles tense and his exhaustion evaporating instantly. The story of this night and the true diagnosis were very far from over. Episode 5. Listening before knowing. The cough was short, dry, but in a room buried in the silence of the early morning. Even the faintest sound can echo like thunder. Daniel leaned toward the child, as if moved by a spring. The system reacted to his adrenaline with an immediate flash. Police Scarlight, new clinical symptom recorded. Cough. Differential diagnosis in progress. The child took a breath again. And another. He was breathing fast, but he didn't seem to be desperately suffocating. Daniel placed the palm of his hand with extreme gentleness on the little one's chest, feeling the heat through the thin clothing. The chest rose. It fell. It rose. It fell. The translucent panel expanded before his eyes with a soft bell sound. I knew subskill unlocked. Clinical respiratory inspection. Trophy +1 EXP. Daniel murmured to himself, mentally reviewing the data. Okay, fast breathing, persistent fever, and now a cough. That triad of symptoms could mean many things. From a simple viral upper respiratory infection to mild bronchitis to something much more lethal like pneumonia. Before his mind could race toward the worst-case scenarios, a golden scroll interrupted his vision. Brain, 5th lesson of the healer. The truth of breath before looking for complex diagnoses or advanced tools. Stop. Observe how the patient breathes. Respiratory mechanics tell a visceral story that the body cannot hide or fake. Daniel tilted his head. It was a brilliant directive. In emergency medicine, the eyes are the first stethoscope. The system then projected a tactical triage guide in the air. Bar chart, triage protocol. Respiratory evaluation. Evaluate 3 critical vectors simultaneously. 1. Frequency. Speed, how many cycles per minute? 2. Amplitude. Depth, is the air volume superficial or full? 3. Work. Effort, is the body physically struggling to oxygenate? Daniel focused all his attention. First, the speed. The child's chest rose and fell in a hurry. But in medicine, fast is not a diagnosis. You need numbers. How fast exactly? Stopwatch, fast calculation method activated. Count the full respiratory cycles for exactly 30 seconds. Multiply the result by 2 to obtain the respiratory rate, RR, per minute. A small holographic stopwatch appeared in the corner of his vision. Daniel fixed his eyes on the child's chest and began to count in silence. 1, 2, 3. The child breathed steadily. Tired, fast but rhythmic. 30 seconds passed. The system processed the data input. Abacus, estimated clinical result. Calculation, 18 breaths in 30 seconds. X2, respiratory rate, 36 breaths per minute. Chart decreasing. Approximate pediatric reference table. Green circle normal, 20 to 30 revolutions per minute. Yellow circle elevated, moderate tachypnea 30 to 40 revolutions per minute. Red circle critical danger, greater than 40 revolutions per minute. Daniel frowned, evaluating the number. 36. It was elevated, clearly outside the basal range, but it hadn't yet entered the red zone of imminent collapse. Trophy correct medical action. Measuring vital signs, +2 EXP. But the visual diagnosis was not complete. The other 2 vectors were missing. Depth. Daniel observed the chest expansion. The breaths were somewhat superficial, typical of someone with a fever trying not to move too much. But they were not empty gasps. Then came the third metric, the most important, the effort. There lay the true indicator of severity. Was the child losing the battle for oxygen? Was the skin sinking between the ribs, intercostal indrawing? Were the neck muscles tensing in a desperate attempt to swallow air? Daniel scrutinized the patient's torso and neck, looking for any strange shadows under the firelight. Nothing. There were no retractions. There was no nasal flaring. He was breathing fast, yes, but the body showed no signs of suffocating. Clipboard. Respiratory evaluation completed. Small orange diamond speed, elevated 36 revolutions per minute. Small orange diamond depth, moderate/superficial. Small orange diamond effort, minimal, no use of accessory muscles. White heavy checkmark inclusion. Current respiratory risk classified as low to moderate. Daniel let the air out of his own lungs slowly, feeling an invisible weight lift from his shoulders. The older man, who hadn't taken his eyes off him, spoke from the doorway. "What do you hear, stranger?" Daniel gave him a small, enigmatic smile. "I'm not listening," he replied in a low voice. "I'm looking." The old man frowned, genuinely bewildered. "Looking at the disease? Does it have a shape?" Daniel pointed to the child's chest with a nod. "The way the body breathes tells you silently what it is fighting against, and how much time it has left." The empirical wisdom of that phrase echoed in the system. Scroll, validated lesson. The clinical eye, a healer who masters respiratory inspection, can distinguish between an asthma attack, lethal pneumonia, or a simple febrile infection, even before touching the patient or possessing advanced medical tools. The woman, kneeling on the other side of the fire, squeezed her hands nervously. "Is he getting worse?" Daniel looked her in the eyes and shook his head, conveying all the calmness he could muster. "No, his body is resisting well." Then, true to his new responsibility, he added with total honesty, "But fever is tricky. We must continue to watch him without rest." The system emitted a comforting hum. "Hourglass not done, night mission progress." Objective: keep the patient stable. Status: 40% completed. Daniel leaned back against the rough wood of the wall. The village was now completely submerged in the silence of the early morning. It seemed the worst had passed. But just in that moment of stillness, the translucent panel flickered with one last warning, almost prophetic. "Brain, sixth lesson of the healer. Your best medical instrument will never be an object. It will be your sustained attention. Fatal errors in medicine occur when the healer commits one of these three mortal sins. They stop observing. They stop listening. They assume victory too quickly." Daniel closed his eyes for just a second, absorbing the lesson, and then the child coughed again. This time, there were 2 coughs in a row, much deeper. They came from the bottom of the chest, with a wet, heavy echo. The system window turned an intense preventive yellow. Warning: clinical change detected. Alert: productive/deep cough recorded. New action required. Visual inspection is insufficient. Stethoscope urgent recommendation. Auscultate, listen to the chest. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, straightening up as his heart skipped a beat. "Well," he whispered, feeling the weight of the night falling over him again. It seems the tutorial just leveled up. Episode 6, The Hidden Language of the Chest. The second cough sounded very different from the first. Deeper, it wasn't a violent spasm, but its wet echo reverberated briefly against the walls of the room. Daniel leaned forward, his senses on high alert. The system reacted to his change in posture with an amber flash. Police Scarlight, new clinical event detected. Updated symptom: persistent cough/possible lower airway involvement. Stethoscope urgent recommendation. Evaluate breath sounds, auscultation. Daniel looked at his empty hands with frustration. In his world, any doctor or nurse would have a stethoscope hanging around their neck for this. Here, there was absolutely nothing. But the system seemed to anticipate this technological barrier. A golden scroll unfurled before him, clearing his doubts. Brain's 7th lesson of the healer. The primary tool medical technology is a modern luxury. The human body is the original instrument. When you lack tools, sharpen your senses, especially your hearing. Daniel tilted his head, incredulous. "You want me to just listen? With my naked ear?" The system expanded the explanation with a translucent diagram. Bar chart method. Direct auscultation 1. Press your ear firmly against the thoracic wall or the patient's back. Avoid thick bony areas. 2. Ask the patient to take deep breaths through their mouth. 3. Isolate your mind from the outside. Concentrate on the flow of air entering and leaving the alveoli. Daniel hesitated for a microsecond. He wasn't used to doing something so rudimentary, so intimate with a patient. But there was no alternative. The child's life depended on the data he could collect. He leaned over the blanket, gently pushed aside the child's clothing, and pressed his ear directly against the warm back, just below the scapula. "Take a deep breath for me, little one," he whispered. "Take air in through your mouth. The child obeyed weakly. Air in, air out. Daniel closed his eyes, blocking out the crackling of the fire and the sound of the wind. Only the thorax beneath his ear existed. Microscope, acoustic analysis in progress. The sound was soft, like the rustle of wind through dry leaves. There was a very slight high-pitched whistle on the exhalation, but nothing dramatic, no serious rouse. The screen projected the results with a comforting green light. Clipboard, preliminary pulmonary evaluation. Small orange diamond, main sound. Vesicular murmur preserved, clear airflow. Small orange diamond, negative findings. No crackles, no bubbling from fluid. Small orange diamond, mild findings. No intense wheezing, airways not collapsed. White heavy checkmark inclusion. Probability of severe pneumonia or pulmonary edema. Low. Trophy +3 EXP for mastering direct auscultation. Daniel lifted his head and let out a long sigh. That was an excellent sign. The system took advantage of his relief to etch a vital concept into his memory. Scroll, acoustic patterns of the chest. When auscultating, classify sounds into 3 spectrums. Green circle, clear air, normal efficient oxygen exchange. Yellow circle, wheezing. Whistling, narrowing due to asthma, allergy, or mid-airway inflammation. Red circle, crackles, bubbling presence of dense mucus, pus, or fluid in the lungs. Pneumonia alert. Daniel looked at the child again. Fortunately, he remained steady in the green category. The mother, who had been holding her breath throughout the process, looked at him with curiosity and terror. "Do you hear something bad, stranger?" Daniel smiled at her, conveying peace. "No, his lungs are clear. The air is flowing well." The older man, standing by the door, crossed his arms, impressed. I have never seen a healer of our world listen like that. No herbs, no smoke, just listening. Daniel nodded, covering the child again. Sometimes the body tells you exactly what is wrong. You just have to know how to listen when it speaks in a whisper. A soft chime validated his progress. Hourglass not done, night mission progress. Objective, keep the patient stable. Status, 65% completed. Daniel let himself fall back against a wooden wall. The fire was beginning to burn down to red embers, and the woman hurried to add a couple of small logs to maintain the heat, without suffocating the room. For a few minutes, everything was perfect stillness. Then, the system broke the visual silence with a new directive. Brain, 8th lesson of the healer. The vast majority of acute febrile illnesses are resolved with the trident of basic care. Absolute rest, fluid replacement, biological time. However, during the watch, the healer monitors 3 critical breaking points. Small orange diamond, that the fever does not cause seizures. Small orange diamond, that breathing does not collapse. Small orange diamond, that the patient does not refuse hydration. Remembering the last point, Daniel took the small clay cup with fresh water. He brought the rim to the child's lips. "Come on, champ. Drink a little more." Just a short sip. The child swallowed water slowly. It was vital to give it in small sips, so as not to cause vomiting. White heavy check mark. Clinical action recorded. Fluid support. Trophy +1 EXP. But just as Daniel was starting to relax and think the night would be quiet, the system detected something new. A tiny detail, but medically unsettling. Warning, additional clinical observation. Visible sign, oral mucosa, lips slightly dry. Preventive diagnosis. Possible onset of mild dehydration due to fluid loss, sweating plus accelerated breathing. Daniel frowned. A high fever evaporated water from the body much faster than a child could handle. Direct hit new mini quest unlocked. Objective, prevent mild hypovolemic shock. Administer small amounts of water frequently and constantly. Reward, +3 EXP. Daniel looked at the cup in his hand, then at the child's face, and finally turned to the woman. His lips are drying out. We need to give him water, but very slowly throughout the night. If he drinks too much at once, he will vomit, and we will lose more fluids. She nodded immediately, stepping closer and taking the cup from Daniel's hands with maternal determination. "I will stay awake. I will give it to him. You can rest a bit." Daniel smiled, feeling a genuine relief at not carrying the entire weight alone. "Then I won't be alone on this watch." The system glowed with a warm light, approving the interaction. Scroll, 9th lesson of the healer. In true community medicine, the healer never works alone. The family is not a nuisance. They are your best resource and an active part of the treatment. Daniel looked at the dark sky through the cracks in the door. Many hours remained until dawn. The night was still dangerously long. And something in his instinct, forged by all those medical readings, told him that the true physiological climax of the illness had not yet arrived. And just at that moment, the child's skin began to glow under the firelight. He began to sweat buckets. The system window exploded immediately. Police scarlight, critical physiological change detected. Sign, profuse diaphoresis, active and severe sweating. Thermoregulatory analysis in progress. Episode 7, when the body releases a heat. The child began to sweat profusely. At first, it was just a subtle glint on his febrile forehead. Then, small droplets began to form at the hairline, sliding down his temples. Daniel noticed it immediately, his muscles tensing. The system noticed, too. Police scarlight, physiological change detected. Diaphoresis, analyzing the clinical significance of active sweating. For a few agonizing seconds, the translucent window stayed in a processing state. Nothing else appeared. Only the crackling of the dying embers and the child's breathing could be heard. The woman, wiping the sweat from her son's face with cloth, looked at Daniel with panic resurfacing in her eyes. Is that bad? Is he getting weaker? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes fixed on the floating panel, waiting for the empirical verdict. Finally, the golden letters unfurled. Brain, 10th lesson of the healer. The duality of sweat. When a febrile patient breaks into a sweat, you face a physiological crossroads. 1. Resolution. Thermolysis of hypothalamus has reset the body's thermostat. Sweat is the mechanism for evaporative cooling. The fever is breaking. 2. Alert. Hypovolemia of the body is losing fluids faster than it can replace them, approaching severe dehydration. The key to the diagnosis is not the sweat itself, but observing the accompanying vital signs. Daniel nodded slowly, processing the information. It made perfect sense. Microscope. Clinical evaluation in progress. Small orange diamond sweat volume, moderate. Small orange diamond respiratory rate, stable/decelerating. Small orange diamond level of consciousness, preserve normal physiological sleep. White heavy checkmark most likely hypothesis, natural drop in core temperature. The fever is breaking. Trophy +2 EXP for maintaining analytical calm and not panicking. Daniel let out a sigh that made his lips tremble. I think it's an excellent sign, he told the mother. His body is finally releasing the trapped heat. The woman smiled with such immense relief, she almost collapsed. But the system, the implacable guardian of health, added an immediate warning. Warning, preventive reminder, diaphoresis protocol. A sweaty body is vulnerable. During the fever drop, remove damp clothing. Cold water on the skin can induce chills and reactivate the fever. Maintain continuous hydration. Block direct cold air drafts. Daniel looked at the child's raw fabric shirt. It was starting to stick to his skin, darkened by the moisture. We need to change his clothes right now, he ordered in a low but authoritative voice. If he gets cold in that wet shirt, he will start shivering and the fever will spike again. The older man nodded, understanding the logic instantly, and went quickly to the chest to find a clean, completely dry shirt. With gentle, coordinated movements, the woman and Daniel helped change the little one without fully waking him. Shield, preventive care successfully performed. Reactive hypothermia risk avoided. Trophy +2 EXP. With dry clothes on, the child sighed deeply in his sleep. His chest rose and fell with much less urgency than an hour ago. Bar chart vital signs update. Green circle estimated respiratory rate. 30 revolutions per minute, returning to basal parameters. General condition, clear improvement. Daniel smiled. That was measurable, real progress. The interface glowed with a comforting light. Scroll, 11th lesson of the healer. The value of the subtle in community medicine. Miracles rarely come with bright lights. Improvement is a biological whisper. Look for small victories. Small orange diamond breathing that slows down. Small orange diamond skin that loses its scorching heat. Small orange diamond a patient who accepts a sip of water. Small orange diamond restless sleep that becomes peaceful. These are the true signs that the body is winning its own war. Daniel looked at the sleeping child. For the first time since night had fallen on the village, the little one's features were relaxed. He seemed to be truly resting. Hourglass not done, night mission progress. Objective: keep the patient stable. Status: 85% completed. Exhausted by the constant adrenaline rush, Daniel let himself slide down until he was sitting on the floor, resting his head against a wooden wall. The village remained submerged in peaceful silence. The fire in the center of the hut was now just a mound of red embers emitting a soft heat. The woman, sitting on the other side, broke the silence with a reverent murmur. "Stranger." Daniel opened one eye and looked up. "Yes. How do you know all this?" she asked, with a mix of respect and genuine wonder. "Our healers sing and burn herbs, but you see things we don't see. You understand the body." Daniel hesitated for a second. He looked at the system's blue window, still floating stoically in front of him, invisible to the rest of the world. He smiled with a mix of irony and extreme fatigue. "I'm learning, just like you," he replied sincerely. The older man, stroking his beard, nodded slowly, approving of the answer. The good healer is the one who knows they never stop learning. The system, almost appearing to have a life of its own, reacted to those exact words with an unusually bright flash. Brain, 12th lesson to healer. Clinical humility, arrogance is a doctor's most lethal disease. A true healer does not assume they know everything. Observe, doubt, learn, correct. Medicine is not a destination. It is a path of perpetual learning. Glowing star plus 2 EXP for class alignment. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the tension in his neck finally give way. It seemed the night and the system were finally on his side. But just as the mission's progress bar was a couple of millimeters away from being filled and closed, the child murmured something unintelligible in his sleep. It was a raspy, weak sound, and then he moved spasmodically, visibly restless. The calm blue light of the interface exploded into a blinking red warning. Warning: neurological activity detected. Status: patient emerging from deep sleep. Alert: atypical behavior. Immediate neurological evaluation required. Daniel's eyes snapped open, all relaxation evaporating from his body in a fraction of a second. "Well," he muttered, running a hand over his exhausted face. "Looks like the next level of the tutorial just started." Episode 8. Medicine is also spoken. The boy opened his eyes. Not completely. It was just a heavy, unfocused slit. But in the tense silence of the hut, that tiny movement was enough for the woman to let out a gasp and lean over him, brushing his cheek. "Son," she whispered, her voice breaking. The little one frowned, murmured something incomprehensible, thick with exhaustion, and closed his eyes again, drifting back into sleep. Daniel, his pulse still racing from the previous alert, watched with extreme attention. The system processed the interaction instantly, changing the warning color to a peaceful green. Brain, patient neurological update. Level of consciousness, reactive to verbal and tactile stimuli. General condition, stable. No signs of comatose lethargy. Trophy plus 1 EXP. Daniel let out a long sigh, feeling his muscles finally lose the rigidity of the watch. Waking up, even briefly and confusedly, was an excellent neurological sign. It ruled out severe brain inflammation, but the system wasn't finished. Now that the physiological crisis seemed controlled, a new window opened, focusing on something completely different. Scroll, 13th lesson of the healer. The art of healing. Science treats the disease. The healer treats the patient. You are not just facing bacteria or viruses. You are facing the fear, doubt, and despair of a family. The way you communicate is your psychological scalpel. Daniel raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. Did I just unlock communication skills? The system responded by deploying 3 golden pillars in the air. Speaking head, clinical communication module, bedside manner. 1. Transparency. Explain your actions. The unknown generates terror. 2. Integrity. Be brutally honest about what you know and humble about what you don't. 3. Respect. Never humiliate a patient's beliefs. Educate them without looking down on them. Daniel looked at the woman. She had been sitting on the dirt floor for hours, watching with a mix of blind hope and absolute terror. She was probably waiting for a definitive answer from his lips, a magical certainty. But real medicine, Daniel thought, almost never offers absolute certainties. He cleared his throat and spoke in a low but comforting tone. The sweating did its job. His fever seemed to be dropping to a safe level. The woman's shoulders slumped with relief, and a trembling smile appeared on her face. So is he cured now? Daniel shook his head gently, immediately applying the system's new lesson. We don't know yet. He has won this battle, but the war against whatever caused the fever isn't over. He is still weak. The system emitted a sharp, satisfying chime. Trophy correct medical action. Expectation management, telling the truth, however hard it may be, forges an indestructible bond. Trust is the only thing that ensures the patient follows your instructions when you are not there. +2 EXP. The older man, who was still stoically standing guard at the door, spoke in a deep voice. I have seen many foreign healers pass through these lands. They all promise quick cures and miracles in exchange for coins. Daniel smiled with fatigue that reached his bones. Fever doesn't know about promises, and bacteria don't take bribes. The old man let out a small, raspy laugh, nodding his head. That is a great truth, lad. The system recorded the interaction with a bright flash Daniel hadn't seen until now. Handshake new statistic unlocked. Community affinity. The village is beginning to trust you. Local reputation. +1. Daniel looked at the boy again. The little one was breathing much more rhythmically and deeply. The sweat had decreased, leaving his skin cool, and the febrile flush on his cheeks had almost completely vanished. Bar chart. Final dawn clinical update. Core temperature. Gradual descent to basal range. General condition. Clear improvement. Hourglass not done, night mission progress. Objective. Keep the patient stable. Status. 95% completed. Daniel stretched, hearing a couple of vertebrae crack. They were almost done, but the system, tireless like a university professor, had one last lesson prepared. Scroll. 14th lesson of the healer. The life multiplier, a doctor's worst mistake, is becoming indispensable. Never encourage dependency. A lone healer cannot save a village, but an educated village can save itself. Your duty is to transfer knowledge. Daniel stared at the text. It had crushing logic. If he was the only one who knew how to lower a fever, the next time a child got sick while he wasn't there, they would die. Knowledge was empowerment. He leaned forward and called for the woman's attention. Listen to me carefully. When someone in the village has a fever like this again, he said in a clear, deliberate voice, there are 3 fundamental things you must do before looking for anyone. She straightened up immediately, listening to him with absolute devotion. What are they? Tell me, stranger. Daniel held up 3 fingers, marking each point firmly. First, water. Frequent and in small sips. Second, rest, without overclothing them. And third, don't look at their forehead, observe their breathing. If the chest sinks or they breathe very fast, it is an emergency. The system validated his words, wrapping them in light. Speaking had public health action. Shared knowledge. You have educated a primary caregiver. Future mortality risk in this family has drastically decreased. Trophy +3 EXP. The woman nodded with solemn seriousness, etching every word into her memory. I will remember. I swear it. Hourglass not done, night mission progress. Status. 99% completed. Daniel turned his head and looked through the frame of the hut's door. On the dark horizon, silhouetting the mountains, a very faint line of bluish and violet light began to tear through the sky. The dawn, the long, terrifying night had finally passed. And just when Daniel thought it was all over, that he could just close his eyes and collapse into sleep, the boy opened his eyes again. This time, it wasn't a confused slit. He was awake, blinking at the morning light. He looked at his mother, then at Daniel, and in a raspy but clear voice said something incredibly simple. "Mama, I'm hungry." The system exploded in a triumphant gold, the brightest color Daniel had seen all night. Glowing star, critical clinical event confirmed. Sign, return of appetite, active caloric demand. In pediatrics, hunger is the first herald of immunological victory. The body has stopped fighting and demands energy to rebuild. Daniel couldn't help it. He let out a laugh of pure relief, because in the cold and calculating world of medicine, few words sounded as beautiful and full of life as a simple "I'm hungry." Episode 9, The Return of Hunger. The child blinked several times, getting used to the brightness. The faint, bluish light of dawn was already seeping through the cracks in the hut's door, dispelling the shadows of the night. His voice had been weak, raspy from lack of use, but the phrase resonated with absolute clarity. "I'm hungry." For a whole second, no one in the room dared to breathe or speak. Then, the woman brought both hands to her mouth, stifling a sob of pure joy. "He's talking. He's hungry." Daniel let out a genuine smile, feeling a ton of tension disappear from his shoulders. The system, as if sharing his enthusiasm, exploded with luminous notifications. Glowing star, positive clinical event confirmed. Sign, appetite present. Oral tolerance restored. Trophy +3 EXP. A new window, adorned with golden borders, unfolded immediately. Scroll. 15th lesson of the healer. The herald of healing. When an acute patient demands food again, it means 3 vital things. The fever curve has collapsed in your favor. The immune system has stopped consuming all the energy. The body is actively beginning its reconstruction phase. In pediatrics, appetite is the most primitive, ancient, and certain sign of survival. Daniel nodded slowly, rubbing his tired eyes. In the modern hospitals of his world, there were complex blood tests, multi-parameter vital signs monitors, and state-of-the-art scanners. But for thousands of years before all that, healers have been guided by the compass of the simplest biological signals: breathing, thirst, and hunger. The system proceeded to close the night case. Clipboard, morning clinical update. Small orange diamond fever, mild/subsiding. Small orange diamond breathing, stable and rhythmic. Small orange diamond consciousness, lucid. Small orange diamond appetite, present. White heavy checkmark general status. Initial recovery phase. Direct hit, main mission completed. The night watch, objective. Keep the patient stable until dawn. Base reward, +6 EXP. And then, the most satisfying sound in the world echoed in his mind. A chorus of bells and a flash of expansive light. Party popper, level up. Current level, 3. Pot of food, new skill branch unlocked, basic clinical dietetics and nutrition. Allows evaluation of food suitability to accelerate recovery without causing gastric distress. Daniel raised an eyebrow, impressed. Post-illness nutrition now? Not bad. The woman, filled with renewed energy, was already stirring among the clay pots near the embers. "We have chicken broth," she said hurriedly, "with a bit of white rice. Can he eat that?" The system activated immediately to assist in the decision. Scroll, post-febrile refeeding protocol, golden rule. The stomach is exhausted. Avoid overload. Green circle recommended. Clear broths, white rice, soft, and cooked fruits. Very small, spaced-out portions. Red circle prohibited. Heavy meats, dense fats, hard fibers, or immediate dairy. Daniel nodded firmly. That broth is perfect. Serve him just a little, half liquid and half rice. Don't let him eat too fast, or he will vomit. The child sat up slowly on the mat, leaning on his mother. He was still pale, and his movements were weak and lethargic. But the ghost of the disease no longer lived in his eyes. Brain, 16th lesson of the healer. After the crisis, the body is a devastated field that needs urgent fluids and calories. Light, a stringent food acts as the first building material that does not overload a fragile digestive system. The child drank the broth in slow sips. With every spoonful that passed down his throat, it seemed a bit more life and color returned to his young cheeks. Shield Nutritional Support successfully initiated Trophy +2 EXP. The older man, who had observed the entire nightly odyssey with crossed arms and an unfathomable expression, finally spoke, breaking his reflective silence. Never, in all my years, had I seen a fever treated this way, with such stillness. Daniel shrugged, leaning back against a wall illuminated by the rising sun. Sometimes the body knows exactly what it has to do. It just needs a safe environment and a little help so it doesn't give up. The old man nodded solemnly. And patience, stranger. A lot of patience. The system captured the wisdom of those words to frame them. Scroll 17th lesson of the healer. The clinical virtue, patience, is not the absence of action. It is a precision medical tool. The vast majority of successful treatments work simply because you bought the body enough time to heal itself. Daniel turned his face to look through the open door. The sun now rose majestically between the mountain peaks, bathing the valley in gold. The village was beginning to wake up from its slumber. The clucking of chickens, the sound of the axe cutting wood, and the distant voices of neighbors could be heard. Normal life followed its course. The system panel condensed into one last closing scroll. Bookmark tabs, clinical case summary, patient 001. Presumptive diagnosis, acute febrile state, possible viral etiology. Conservative treatment applied. Small orange diamond controlled oral hydration. Small orange diamond physical thermoregulation. Small orange diamond passive respiratory monitoring. Small orange diamond absolute rest. White heavy checkmark result. Survival and improvement. Daniel let out a long breath that misted in the cool morning air. His first patient in this unknown world had survived the night under his care. Scroll, healer's final reflection. Cutting-edge knowledge is useless if it is not accessible. The most powerful medicine in the darkest corners of the world remains. Clean water, adequate nutrition, rest, and the empathetic observation of a healer. Daniel looked at the child, who was now devouring the grains of rice with childish enthusiasm, while the woman stroked his hair, smiling for the first time since the previous sunset. Daniel thought that was a perfect ending to his first adventure. He closed his eyes, ready to sleep at last. But the system was not finished. The hum that followed was not the soft chime of reward, but a deep, resonant sound, like a battle horn. A completely new notification, gigantic and with platinum borders, blocked his entire vision. Globe show in Europe, Africa. New main campaign quest unlocked. Context. This village lives in medical ignorance and on the constant brink of tragedy. They need a permanent pillar healer. Global objective. Master the foundations of community medicine and eradicate lethal practices from the environment. Books, medical compendium progress. Chapter 1. Successfully completed. Remaining chapters for basic mastery. 22. Daniel stayed there blinking, stupefied by the enormous holographic window. 22 chapters? He murmured to himself. Then he looked down at the village coming to life under the morning light, full of people who surely had dozens more diseases and wounds. He smiled, a smile of pure resignation, fatigue, and strangely deep motivation. Well, he whispered, settling on the floor to close his eyes. I guess we just finished chapter 1 of the tutorial. Episode 10, the difference between helping and hurting. The sun rose majestically over the mountain range, bathing the valley in a warm, golden light. The village was fully awake now, slowly filling with a symphony of daily life. The sporadic clucking of chickens, the crunch of footsteps on the dry earth, and the rhythmic echo of someone chopping wood in the distance. The child, wrapped in a clean blanket, was sitting on the threshold of the hut, slowly eating from a small bowl of rice. The color had returned to his cheeks. Daniel watched him from the shadows inside, leaning against the wall. Fatigue weighed heavy in his bones, but his mind remained alert. The system had been floating in front of him in an expectant silence until a new golden light broke the stillness. Brain, 18th lesson of the healer. The triad of tradition. In all human cultures, empirical remedies exist. Some are authentic medicine, some are just comfort, and others are poison disguised as a cure. The healer's job is not to eradicate them, but to classify them. Daniel immediately remembered the rustic wooden table from the night before, the bitter leaves, the knotty root of unknown origin, and the lethal mixture of ash and tobacco. 3 clinical examples perfectly aligned. The system deployed a holographic outline, structuring his thoughts. Bar chart, community pharmacological triage. Green circle supportive remedies. Useful, they offer a real biomechanical or chemical benefit to the body. Empirical examples. Hydrating infusions, easily digestible foods, thermal compresses, clean water. Yellow circle placebo remedies. Neutral. They possess no pharmacological properties, but provide psychological relief. They do not cure, but they do not harm. Empirical examples. Amulets, prayers, symbolic rituals without ingestion of substances. Red circle iatrogenic remedies. Dangerous. Their use worsens a clinical picture or induces new pathologies. Empirical examples. Ingestion of toxic substances, inhalation of irritating smoke, application of soil/feces to open wounds. Daniel crosses arms, processing the philosophy behind the cold data. So, the strategy isn't about arriving and destroying all their traditions, he muttered to himself. The system responded immediately to his deduction, recording it as an axiom. Balanced scale. Principle of medical diplomacy. Scrupulously respect what does no harm, yellow circle. Conserve and encourage what genuinely helps, green circle. And concentrate your authority solely on correcting what can kill, red circle. Daniel nodded slowly. That explained the mistake made by so many modern doctors in rural areas. If a healer arrives in a community acting with arrogance, saying that everything their ancestors knew is garbage, no one will listen. He will have lost the patient before even touching them. But if he validates their successes first, then he will earn the moral authority to guide the changes that save lives. A soft chime pulled him from his thoughts. Trophy clinical affinity understood, +2 EXP. At that precise moment, the light from the door darkened momentarily. The older man had returned, carrying a heavy burlap sack. "Stranger," the old man said with a tone of renewed respect. "If you plan to stay with us, there are things about this land you must know." He opened the sack on the table. Inside was a true botanical treasure, at least 10 different plants. Long, serrated leaves, thick roots full of knots, and bunches of dried flowers tied with hemp cord. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The system exploded with notifications, recognizing the loot. Herb, new pharmacognosy challenge unlocked. Objective, identify and catalog local materia medica. Potential research reward, +10 EXP. Daniel let out a long, resigned sigh. Well, looks like the gathering tutorial just started. The old man sat across from him, taking the plants out with reverence. "Our grandfathers used these roots when there was no one else to turn to in the valley." Daniel took one of the leaves. He turned it between his fingers, feeling its rough texture and smelling its minty aroma. The system began to scan it, projecting a subtle beam of light, but before showing the result, it interposed a new golden rule. Brain 19th lesson of the healer. The root of science, never underestimate local botanical knowledge. Modern pharmacology was born in the forest, not in the laboratory. Remember, aspirin was born from willow bark. Quinine from malaria from the cinchona tree. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That was undeniably true. Behind many of the white, synthetic pills he knew, there was a 1,000-year-old story of someone boiling leaves in a remote village. The system emitted a beep, finishing the spectral scan of the first leaf. Microscope, partial botanical identification. Plant, endemic species. Probable active ingredient. Salicylates or other compounds with mild anti-inflammatory effect. Green circle classification. Potentially useful, natural NSAID of low intensity. Trophy +3 EXP. Daniel smiled, placing the leaf carefully on the table. "It seems some of your grandfathers knew exactly what they were doing," he told the old man. The older man smiled, puffing out his chest with deep ancestral pride. However, the system, always the guardian of prudence, added one last severe warning in red. Warning, critical pharmacological note. The dose makes the poison. Even plants categorized as green circle useful can cause organ failure if they are administered in excessive doses, hepatic/renal toxicity. They are combined with antagonist compounds. They are administered to pediatric patients without adjusting for body weight. Daniel looked over the pile of plants in front of him. For the first time, he understood something profound about his new class. Being a healer wasn't about magically memorizing an encyclopedia of remedies. It was about learning to reason carefully about each one of them. Bar chart, Chapter 1 progress. Master lessons assimilated, 19. Remaining lessons to complete the volume, 3. Daniel looked out toward the village lit by the morning sun. The morning was just beginning. The air was fresh, and there was peace. But the system knew no rest, and already had its next target in sight. A lesson many novice doctors in his world learned when it was already too late. Police Scarlight, next lesson Piari loaded topic. The most lethal and silent mistake a healer can make. Daniel sighed, closed his eyes for a second. That sounds incredibly worrying. Episode 11, the error that kills more than ignorance. The sack of plants remained open on the rustic wooden table. The old man arranged each herb with reverential care, as if they were fragile pieces of an ancient memory about to disappear. Daniel watched him in silence, letting his mind rest. Suddenly, the system interface glowed with a pulsing light. Something in the texture of the holographic windows had changed. The golden tone became more serious, almost cautionary. Scroll, 20th lesson of the healer. The ego trap, the most lethal error in clinical practice, is not born of pure ignorance. It is born of arrogance. It is firmly believing you know the answer when, in reality, you are blind. Daniel frowned, crossing his arms. Are you talking about overconfidence? The system responded by projecting a small miniature holographic simulation on the table. An imaginary healer appeared, examining a patient writhing with acute abdominal pain. The healer, barely touching him or asking questions, declared with superiority, "It's just heavy indigestion. Give him tea and let him sleep." Hours later, in the simulation, the patient worsened drastically due to undetected appendicitis, and the image faded into red. Warning, fatal clinical error detected. Cause, premature diagnostic closure, assuming without verifying. Consequence, negligent treatment, avoidable mortality. Daniel pressed his lips together. That sounded terrifyingly familiar. He knew that even in the most modern and technological hospitals of his world, this was one of the biggest causes of accidental death. The system expanded the warning, fixing it in his memory. Police Scarlight, the 3 mortal sins of diagnosis. 1. Diagnosing too fast, anchoring to the first idea and stopping the thought process. 2. Ignoring new signs, dismissing a patient's symptoms just because they don't fit your initial theory. 3. Refusing to change your mind, protecting your pride above the patient's life. Daniel looked over at the boy, who was now walking slowly near the door, soaking up the morning sun. The fever had almost disappeared, but the lesson was like a bucket of ice water. If he had assumed too early during the night that everything was fine and had gone to sleep, he might not have noticed the sweat or the changes in breathing. And if the infection had attacked again, he wouldn't have realized in time. Brain, golden rule of clinical reasoning. A true healer always asks one last question before turning their back. What if I'm wrong? What else could it be? Daniel smiled slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. That is uncomfortably wise. Trophy mental action. Self-criticism unlocked. +2 EXP. The old man, unaware of the floating panels and the young man's epiphany, held up one of the dried leaves to the sunlight. Our old healers used to say something very similar. Stranger. Daniel looked at him, intrigued. What did they say? The old man looked him in the eyes with the hardness and wisdom of his years. They said, listen to the sick person with more attention than you pay to your own pride. Daniel let out a small, sincere laugh. Your village has excellent medical philosophers. The system vibrated, validating the old man's words and merging them with its own database. Scroll, 21st lesson of the healer. The best book in medicine. The human body will teach you things that no encyclopedia explains. Keep your senses always open to. Small orange diamond, the appearance of new symptoms. Small orange diamond, subtle changes in behavior. Small orange diamond, what the patient feels, even if you cannot measure it. Daniel nodded in silence. The medicine of his world had MRIs and high-precision laboratories. But even with all that arsenal, the most brilliant diagnosis almost always began with a simple and human question from an attentive doctor. Tell me, where does it hurt and what do you feel? Bar chart, Medical Compendium Progress. Lessons assimilated, 21. Remaining lessons, 1. Daniel raised an eyebrow, feeling a spark of anticipation. Only one left. The final boss of the tutorial. The interface flickered and reconfigured completely. The last lesson of the chapter did not appear as a long scroll of explanatory text. It appeared as a direct judgment of his judgment. Question mark, final test of Chapter 1. The healer's decision. Based on everything you have analyzed, protected, and experienced tonight, what is it that saves the most lives in the history of medicine? 1. High-potency medications. 2. Encyclopedic knowledge of pathologies. 3. Advanced machines and tools. 4. Prevention, hygiene, and community education. Daniel looked at the list of options floating in the vibrating air. He thought about the night he had just survived, about the bowl of clean water, about the patience for rest, about the firm rejection of contaminated mud and suffocating smoke, about teaching a terrified mother to observe her son's breathing. A smile of absolute certainty appeared on his face. I think I know the answer perfectly. The system remained silent, waiting. The healer's choice would define the reward his class and how his story would continue in this implacable world. Episode 12. The answer that changes everything. The system's golden question remained floating before Daniel's eyes, unperturbed. Question mark. Final test of Chapter 1. The healer's decision. What saves the most lives in the history of medicine? 1. High-potency medications. 2. Encyclopedic knowledge of pathologies. 3. Advanced machines and tools. 4. Prevention, hygiene, and community education. Daniel crossed his arms, thoughtful. The morning sun now fully illuminated the valley. Around him, the village came to life. Some children ran, chasing each other between the wooden houses, and the small patient from the night before was now walking slowly, clutching his mother's skirt, taking in the fresh breeze. Daniel mentally reviewed the dawn's odyssey. He hadn't administered a single modern drug. He hadn't relied on monitors, scanners, or intravenous for lines. He hadn't even achieved an exact differential diagnosis of the pathogen. And yet the child had survived and was improving. The system pulsed softly, waiting for his verdict. Daniel looked up and spoke his answer with absolute clinical certainty. Number 4. Prevention. For an eternal second, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the panel exploded into a shower of golden and blue sparks that lit up his peripheral vision. White every checkmark correct answer. Clinical excellence achieved. Trophy plus 5 EXP. A final scroll, adorned with seals of light, unfurled majestically. Scroll, 20-second lesson of the healer. The true shield primary prevention saves exponentially more lives than any reactive treatment. The ultimate victory of modern medicine was not learning to cure disease, but learning to prevent the patient from getting sick in the first place. Daniel tilted his head, agreeing with the interface's intelligence. The system began to project statistics and holographic examples in the air. Bar chart, historical pillars of human survival, droplet purified drinking water, toilet basic sanitation, waste management, syringe vaccination and prophylaxis, soap asepsis and hand washing, light bulb universal axiom. More human lives have been saved throughout the centuries by access to clean water and soap than by all the operating rooms and antibiotics in the world combined. Daniel let out a small, ironic laugh. Sure, boiling water and washing hands doesn't sound as heroic or spectacular as doing open-heart surgery. The system responded immediately to his comment, validating his sarcasm. Scroll, the inconvenient truth of medicine. The medical ego seeks complexity, but statistics prove that the simplest and cheapest health interventions are the true walls against mortality. The old man, who had been putting the plants back into his sack, noticed Daniel's far-off gaze and approached him. What are you looking at so intently, stranger? Daniel looked down and pointed with his chin toward the old stone well in the center of the village. That well right there, he said in a serious voice. That water can save many more lives in this valley than any healer, herb, or prayer. The older man looked at him, genuinely confused. The water? Daniel nodded. If the water you drink is clean and free of parasites, dozens of deadly diseases will simply never appear in your bodies. I won't have to lower their fevers, because the fever will never arrive. The system recorded the profound revelation in real time. Speaking heads shared epidemiology concepts, trophy plus 3 EXP. The elder observed the well with a new, grave expression, stroking his beard. It is true that our children sometimes get very sick in the stomach. They have strong diarrhea, fevers that dry them out from the inside. Some do not survive the rainy season. Daniel tensed and looked at him fixedly. Do you boil the water before giving it to the children? Or do you drink it directly from the well? The old man shook his head slowly, evidencing the village's lethal ignorance. We drink it fresh, as the earth gives it to us. Daniel closed his eyes and smiled with resignation. Perhaps we just found the cause of half your misfortunes and our next big mission. The system vibrated immediately, emitting the sound of campaign trumpets. Globe showing Europe Africa new public health mission unlock campaign. Educate the village in prophylaxis and basic prevention. Primary objectives. Small Orange Diamond implement mandatory boiling of drinking water. Small Orange Diamond improve hygiene in food handling. Small Orange Diamond establish an isolation protocol for basic contagions. Daniel exhaled slowly, letting the pure mountain air fill his lungs. He now understood the true core of his new existence. Being the healer of this village wasn't just going to be an emergency room job, running from bed to bed treating critical patients. It was about educating them to prevent them from becoming patients. The system sealed the learning with one last phrase that glowed in the center of his vision. Glowing star, absolute principle of Chapter 1. The best and greatest healer in the world is the one who works so hard on prevention that their community no longer needs their services. Daniel looked at the village. The morning bustled with vibrant energy. For the first time since he woke up under an unknown sky, he felt he was beginning to understand the immense weight and purpose of his role in this place. But the system, always calculating, had not yet ended the event. A final notification, with a dark warning design, flashed in red. Hourglass Not Done Compendium, Chapter 1, 99% theoretical phase passed. Warning preparing final practical evaluation of the healer. Daniel let his shoulders drop and sighed deeply. Damn it, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Episode 13, The Healer's Test. The system's behavior changed suddenly. The luminous windows that had been floating lazily in front of Daniel snapped shut, only to reorganize and assemble into a much larger, structured central panel, as if setting the stage for something critical. Police Scarlight. Final chapter evaluation initiated. Current level 3. Lessons assimilated 22/22. Warning requirement to advance. Practical triage test required. Daniel let out a long sigh, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Of course, why didn't I think of that? If there's a tutorial, obviously there has to be a final exam. The system projected a small red beacon toward the outside. But this time, it wasn't a holographic simulation. 2 villagers were walking hurriedly toward the hut, kicking up dust as they came. One of them, a young man, was holding the other by the shoulders. The second man walked awkwardly, completely hunched over in a clear antalgic position, pressing both hands against his abdomen with a grimace of suffering. The old man, who was still tidying his herbs, looked up and glanced at Daniel with a raised eyebrow. Stranger, it seems rest will have to wait. You have another patient. Daniel muttered under his breath, clenching his teeth. Did the damn tutorial generate this too? The system responded immediately, outlining the hunched man silhouette with a blue scanner. Direct hit. Practical evaluation scenario. Acute abdomen. Patient. Male presenting localized abdominal pain. Test objective. You are not required to diagnose the exact etiology of the disease. Your only goal is to apply the rule-out protocol to evaluate if there's an imminent danger of death, surgery/shock. Daniel stood up, brushing the dust off his pants. He instinctively adopted his new clinical posture. The injured man slowly collapsed onto a cut log in front of the hut, letting out short moans. His face showed evident pain, but his eyes did not reflect that absolute panic that accompanies lethal emergencies. Daniel forced his mind to slow down. He remembered the first lessons of the chapter. Do not start with biased conclusions. Observe first. The system deployed a checklist to one side of his vision, waiting for him to take the initiative. Clipboard, abdominal danger signs checklist. Airway and neuro. Is the airway clear and neurological status stable? Can he speak and respond coherently? Oral tolerance. Can he retain fluids? Obstruction/toxicity. Is there continuous emesis or blood in the vomit? Systemic infection. Is there high fever or a board-like abdomen? Shock. Is he extremely weak or pale? Daniel began his medical questioning or anamnesis with a firm and calm voice. Take it easy, look at me. Exactly when did the pain start? The man raised his head and answered with difficulty, but articulating his words well. Since the sun came up this morning. A cramp woke me up. Good sign. His airways were clear and his brain was receiving enough oxygen to string together temporal responses. White heavy check mark. Airway and neuro. Stable, trophy +1 EXP. Daniel continued, focusing on digestive symptoms. Have you vomited? Do you feel constant nausea? No. It just hurts here like my guts are being bitten. Another crucial point ruled out. A severe intestinal obstruction or a ruptured appendix would almost always be accompanied by violent emesis. White heavy check mark. Obstruction risk. Low. Trophy +1 EXP. Can you drink water without gagging? The man nodded weakly, took a small clay cup the old man offered him, and took a short sip, swallowing without a problem. White heavy check mark. Oral tolerance. Confirmed trophy +1 EXP. Finally, Daniel stepped closer and placed the back of his hand on the man's forehead and neck. Temperature was completely normal. No diaphoresis, cold sweat. His breathing was somewhat tachypneic, fast, but was clearly superficial and caused by physical pain, not a lack of air. The system compiled the data and showed a pre-analysis. Microscope, preliminary triage evaluation. Finding, acute abdominal pain. Ruled out, no peritonitis, no shock, no severe dehydration. White heavy checkmark. Current condition, stable. Imminent vital risk ruled out. Daniel leaned back a bit, relaxing his posture. For now, it doesn't seem to be a surgical emergency or anything that puts your life at immediate risk. The man let out a shaky sigh, and his shoulders slumped in relief. Almost instinctively, Daniel was about to end the consultation and prescribe rest, but his mind clicked. He remembered the last painful lesson of the chapter. Never assume too quickly. Premature diagnostic, closure kills. He leaned forward again, sharpening his gaze. Tell me the truth. Did you eat or drink anything strange yesterday or early this morning? The man blinked, thought for a moment, and looked away, somewhat embarrassed. Well, I ate a few green fruits from that tree that grows near the bend in the river. I was hungry before dawn. The old man, listening intently, let out a raspy laugh and struck his cane against the ground. Ah, you foolish boy. That explains a lot. Those fruits are like poison for the gut if they aren't ripe. Daniel raised an eyebrow, unable to suppress a wry smile. Does he do this often? Sometimes the stomach wins over the head. The old man replied, laughing. The system updated its final diagnosis with a victorious sound. Direct hit, clinical hypothesis, confirmed diagnosis. Mild gastrointestinal irritation due to dietary indiscretion, unripe fruit. Daniel nodded, giving the villager a gentle pat on the shoulder. You probably just need to lie down, drink clean water to flush your stomach, and endure the pain until your body expels what you ate. You'll survive. The system interface vibrated with dazzling intensity, enveloping Daniel's vision in a bright golden light that eclipsed the morning sun for a second. Glowing star, practical evaluation, completed with absolute success. Result, diagnostic criteria and triage protocol executed without flaws. You avoided confirmation bias. Trophy exam reward, +8 EXP. Daniel crossed his arms, feeling a surge of genuine pride. So did I pass? The system not only responded, but deployed virtual banners around him. Graduation Cap Compendium Chapter 1. Completed. Military Medal New Medical Rank unlocked from Classless Apprentice to Herb Apprentice Healer. Your voice now carries empirical weight in low development communities. The system added one last scroll with virtual wax seals, which unfurled majestically. Scroll. Final message from the compendium. Volume I. You have assimilated the fundamental axiom that separates a dangerous quack from a true clinician. I observe first. The eyes are the first stethoscope. Brain thinks second. Look for danger before the name. Palms up together, act with care. Primum non nocere. Daniel looked toward the village square. 2 patients in less than 24 hours. And this was only the dawn of his first official day. But the system was not going to give him a break. The interface transformed, revealing the silhouette of a giant, much more complex-looking book that snapped open. Unlocked, Chapter 2 unlocked. Open book title. Basic Pathophysiology. How to understand the language of disease. Daniel sighed with a smile heavy with exhaustion, resignation, and a strange sense of purpose. 22 more chapters. He whispered. The old man looked at him sideways, tilting his head. What did you say, stranger? Do you speak with the spirits? Daniel stood up, stretching the aching muscles of his back one last time. Nothing, just talking to myself. Then he looked at the vast horizon full of untamed mountains and unexplored forests, making a final decision. I was just saying, I think I'm going to stay with you for a while.